for me, creativity is the ability to dip a spoon, or perhaps a palm, into the pool of the universe, into the energy that connects us all, and pull up something beyond our own imaginations. For me, one of the ways I regularly access that space is to get very, very quiet. Quiet enough that I can hear beyond the world, beyond myself, into whatever is on the other side. That was written by Jillian Christmas. So thrilled to invite her to the stage. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hi. While I get myself set up here, I think we may be lucky enough to have just one more little splash of sibling harmonies. So enjoy. And I'm going to be moving slowly on purpose. I speak things into being. That's the kind of witch I am. Conjurer, careful when I spell your name. I will not say it unless I believe it is real. This charming trick where I give you my voice the same moment the breath leaves your lung, making ritual of the hymns we didn't sing when the magic stopped working, unfurling dirge themes, laying teeth at your boot. This is a wicked wisdom, and it is a metronome. It is a warning and backward barking drum. I dare not whisper a curse with my own blood on my tongue. No matter how perfect this blessing, it will not bond if I do not open my mouth. I love you both so much.
I love you back.
Please, can we give it up one more time for the incredible siblings, Karina Keeling and Jess Keeling. They are an incredible gift to all of us and to themselves, to each other. Hi, and welcome. I'm Jillian Christmas, and it's really nice to be here with all of you. I am going to move quite organically here. I'm going to move quite slowly, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am, why I am, and what I do. And I should start by acknowledging that these here are not my territories. I have been living on the territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people for 12 and a half years now. But originally, I was born and raised on the territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of New Credit, colonially known as Southern Ontario. And who am I? I am a poet. I am an artist. I am a weaver. I am an auntie, and I take that role with great silliness and also seriousness. I am always trying to be in better community. I'm somebody who cares deeply about the networks that hold us together, especially in the face of systems that attempt to tear us apart. I am someone who was raised Catholic and is not anymore. I am somebody who is the product of a mosaic of ancestors. My people are from Trinidad and Tobago by way of the transatlantic slave trade. And so that means that there are parts of my ancestry that I don't have access to. I know that my ancestry extends to West Africa, but I can't put my finger exactly on where. I know that I have Portuguese and Spanish ancestry as well. And it's important to me to visit with those parts of myself, even the ones that I don't know very well. And so all of that is to say that, yes, we are here in Pride Month. We're going to be talking about Pride, but what I really want to talk about, sort of in the mix of talking about Pride, is ritual and ceremony, especially in outsider experience and in queer experience, because those are things that I know very well, and they're things that make me who I am. And so I want to honor them. I want to share them with you. And I hope that we can all discover maybe a little bit about ourselves, our needs, and how we can make them sacred and give them the attention that they deserve. How does that sound? Good. So I will start by saying one of the things, and there's not a lot of things, but one of the things that I miss about the Catholic Church, there's very few things, is ritual and ceremony. I was raised in the church. I was the first female altar server in St. Patrick's in Markham, Ontario, breaking ground, glass ceilings and all. Yeah, and the first lectern I stood behind was in that church, reading the gospel and finding my own voice and my own meaning in it. But as somebody who was a little queerdo, unfortunately, I was also harmed quite a bit by the church, just in being there and sort of receiving and hearing on such a regular basis the beliefs and thoughts that were held around queerness, and other communities as well. And it made me terribly sad, I respect spirituality, I respect any religion or belief that allows us to be a better version of ourselves and to dig down and resource what we need to be better humans in the world. But unfortunately, that wasn't the way I was offered religion. And so in order to be in that space, I had to shed certain parts of myself or hide or mask or compartmentalize. I often used to say, going back to visit my family, it's like you have to leave part of yourself at the door, And that's not a really good way to be whole. It's not a really good way to heal. And so I required a lot of distance from that and from even my family of origin in order for me to be able to ground myself in the things that remind me that I and queerness and my community and humanity and all the things that I love are sacred, are absolutely necessary, are here by design. And so I think a lot about ritual and ceremony and who gets to have it. Because, so many of us, our journeys here have been disrupted by colonization, disrupted by oppression, disrupted by loss, isolation, separation, and that often means that we don't get access to the rituals that could be serving us, that could be helping us to create that sense of wholeness and pride and esteem in ourselves and the ones that we love. And so, I've definitely mourned a lot for the rituals that have been lost, not just the ones that I got to participate in the church. I won't say that singing in Catholic church was my favorite church singing, only because if you've been to Catholic church, you know it's more of like a drone than a song. But my grandmother, who raised me and was really fundamental in me loving myself, she used to take me down to her Caribbean church in downtown Toronto every so often. And there I would get to hear like just raucous, joyous songs. And there was always some auntie with like candy in her purse, just waiting for me. And afterwards everyone would go down to the hall underneath and have food and talk and probably gossip a little bit too and all of that. But it was beautiful. It was community, and I felt very welcome there. Even in those conflicts I was having with religion, I understood that sharing song together, sharing a meal together, gathering in this way was so important, so necessary. And so I think about ritual and what we need to acquire it, ceremony and how we receive it. And I think I spent a lot of time grieving the ceremonies of my ancestors that I may never know, the language of my ancestors that I may never know. The people of Trinidad and Tobago, the indigenous people there, both of my grandmothers are of those people, the Kalinago people of Trinidad and Tobago. Once called the Caribs, but that is another label of colonization. Their name is the Kalinago people, and the language that they spoke is not spoken anymore. There are some folks in some of the Caribbean islands who reclaim it or speak a version that is different from what existed where my people are from, but the likelihood that I'll access it is quite low. Though I'll keep trying. I'll keep trying. Maybe I'll find some scholar somewhere who will help me out. But it's important to me that violence does not prevent me from sourcing that creativity that we dip from the universe, that doesn't prevent me from connecting with people who see me and want to lift me up, or from using the skills and resources I have to do the same for others, and creating a rhythm that makes that natural and consistent in our lives. Yeah, I think one of the things that ritual has the power to do is to support us when we're in the worst of times. And this is very clear in religion. People lean and they pray and they gather and they mourn together. But if we don't have those structures, you can kind of go spinning like a top, when you don't have something to hold you, something to lean on. And so for me, in the absence of the rituals I was raised with that no longer fit me, no longer suit me, and maybe didn't ever, and in the absence of the rituals that were taken and made illegal and, erased, it's now my job to create the rituals that I need. And I think that's what my ancestors would like me to do, because I know that what they had was the rituals and the ceremonies that they needed for them in the space that they were, in the time that they were, with the materials that they had. And I am here with different materials, with different needs, with different ideas. And so I think that it is important to acknowledge that difference and to speak to what is needed now and here. And so that's what I do. And that's what I try to share with people is this language of ritual that allows us to return to ourselves again and again as much as we need to. I want to introduce you to, I'm so smart. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine just by speaking about him. It's also a ritual that I practice. My friend's name was Zacchaeus Jackson Nice. And there are some in the room who, oh gosh, early morning really brings the tears up. There are some in the room who knew him well, and others who didn't, but if you care to, you can look him up on the internet where his work still lives. And Zacchaeus was taken away from us in 2014 by a freak accident. It was so silly, like it was so almost ridiculous that it was hard to believe. But while he was here, he did more work than most do in a lifetime. He was an incredible poet. He was an incredible educator. He was an incredible friend. He was like 6-something, Blackfoot, like punk rock, just like tender-hearted human. And if you were standing beside him, you probably felt safe because he had that effect. And one of the things about Zacchaeus was that he didn't have an easy life at all. And I think he also suffered from the loss of ritual and connection to his people. He was adopted and didn't grow up with the rituals of his indigenous heritage, his Blackfoot heritage, and also had a lot of barriers piled upon him. And he suffered for a long time with drug addiction, with houselessness, I think he had a line in a poem that said he was addicted to everything from crack to French toast. And it was true. And, but he was so wise, even in those moments of living with everything that he had on his back. He made a ritual of reciting his poetry to himself. He never wrote it down, or I shouldn't say never. I'm sure he wrote some things down. I've seen his handwriting here and there, but he didn't collect them in a book. I think he was used to losing things or having them tossed by the police. And he memorized all of his poetry, and he just, recited it to himself over and over again. And at some point in his healing journey, he found the Poetry Slam. I think he said he was in a fight with his partner and wanted to slam something, and he saw this sign that said "slam" on the sidewalk, and so he was like, "That's for me." And he went in and he recited his poetry, and he won that slam. And he won who knows how many slams after that. And he won himself back. And he shared himself with community. And he taught me so much of what I know about being an educator, being a human, being flawed, being worthy of redemption and pride and love and care. He would invite the community into his tiny home on Commercial Drive, little apartment that kind of looks over, now I think it's a cafe, but he would invite poets and strangers up for a meal every Canada Day, which, is not a favored holiday by Indigenous folks, you may know, in general, I think. But one of the ways I think that Zach embodied healing and generosity and care for himself and others was to celebrate on that day by inviting all of these people into his home and asking them not to bring anything, and just cooking us this incredible meal where we could just luxuriate in his presence. And it was a lovely ritual that I'm really grateful that I got to be a witness and a part of. Zach taught me so many things. Thank you, my love. Zach taught me so many things, and one of them is that, and one of the things that I've had to be reminded of also by other loves and friends who see me and have seen me, is that we can all lose things, you know? We can all lose even the things that make us aware of who we are. And I have done that. I have been there. I suffered severe, and you know, PTSD is not a thing you stop suffering from, but like, I suffered really severe PTSD in 2021 after a pretty terrible car accident and the fallout of that. And it took a lot from me, including my ability to recognize myself. Really and truly, like, I don't know if you've all had this experience of looking in a mirror and not seeing yourself, but it's really scary. It can be really scary. It can be really hard, and I felt that, and so much more. You know, panic attacks that really made it impossible for me to be here, for sure, to answer the phone, to feed myself, to leave my apartment for almost a year. Lots of hard stuff. And I had to find a way back to myself. And believe me, there was many therapists, psychiatrists, and medications all along that way. But also, there was the medicine of friendship and the reminder of who I am. One of my hardest days, a friend came to my home, and I had just had delivered a copy of a book that I had contributed to. At the time, it was painful because I couldn't recognize the person who had written those words. But my friend sat and anointed my head with oil and put their hands on me and read to me my words. We were both crying and holding each other. And it meant everything to me to have that space held for me. And also it reminded me of this ritual of Zach's to recite his words back to himself. And so I started doing that. I started reading my book back to myself. And every page I was like, I do remember her. It was so powerful. And so it's become one of my rituals when I feel lost, when I feel loss, when I come untethered. Sometimes I put on one of Zach's poems on YouTube, and sometimes I read my own poems to myself. Sometimes I stand at my altar that I arrange and rearrange, and I call in my ancestors. This is a little pin that Zach used to call himself an East Van ghetto poet. I also have on here a pin that recognizes the necessity of Black queer liberation, and a number of other pieces that call me back to myself. And they're so important. They're so important now and always and forever, but especially now, I think sometimes we also have this idea that ritual and ceremony is something that can only exist, one, as something that's given to us or imposed on us, and also as something that is like only kept for special, very special moments, you know, in this particular context. And I would argue that we need ritual all the time. Ritual helps me take my meds every morning. Ritual helps me spend time with my cats and remember that I am also a creature. Ritual helps me check in with my body and my breath. It helps me check in with my friends and my people. And, all of these things are fundamental to having a healthy, creative, pride and sense of community and connection, belonging. All of those things can come from these rhythms that we create for ourselves. And we don't need an altar, and we don't need a church to walk into. All you need is yourself and what you consider sacred and what you consider beautiful, and you just need to name it and hold space for it inside of yourself. There's so much that we forget in any given day, and yeah, I think ritual is a thing that can help hold us beyond the confines of our memory or our 24 hours or whatever it might be. One of the ways that I think ritual is also incredibly important is in helping us evolve. So one of the things that I often mourn is, and it's not just mine to mourn, it's all of ours to mourn, is the pre-colonial ideas and beliefs that were held about gender. I know that in the Caribbean, where I'm from, and even in parts of Africa, there were ideas about gender that were much more expansive than the sort of binary that we have here, and ideas about relationship. I'm someone who is polyamorous. Hey. I thought earlier, I was like, maybe I should have done a talk about polyamory, but no, I would need more than 20 minutes, but yeah, I'm polyamorous. I have multiple partners, and it's like a huge part of who I am and how I exist in the world, and also like, I need lots of support. I need a whole team, and I'm so grateful for those presences in my life. And yeah, I think that I'll tell you a little bit about sort of my idea of gender. And this is the first time I've ever said this in front of more than like one person. So if you disagree with me, that's awesome. Let's talk about it. And if you disagree with me, cool. Tell me what your ideas are. This is just sort of one of my musings, having meditated on this for so long. I think we get attached to certain ideas about gender, color, and certain like gender roles that have all been created within the last 100 years or 50 years or whatever. If we look back in even like Renaissance era England, there were different ideas about who pink was for and who baby blue was for. And these things are arbitrary, They're just somebody's idea. So I don't really attach myself to those ideas of femininity or those ideas of masculinity. But what I do think, and bear with me here, go with me on this, I think of feminine energy, something not that just, people who are assigned female at birth hold, but feminine energy is something that we all hold as the energy that asks. And I think about masculine energy as the energy that answers. And that's not to say this is not to say men have all the answers and women have all the questions. That's not at all what I'm saying. Both of those energies exist in all of us. And I think that a balance of those energies is what creates a wholeness in the world. I think, unfortunately, we often lean very much toward answer, towards being sure, towards saying, I know this thing, and we don't always lean so deeply into question. Why are we here together? What does this room need? How are we gonna move through this together? And I think it's so important that we have both of those. And I will also say that just because there is an answer doesn't mean it's a correct answer. And it's also not always gonna come unless we ask the question. And likewise, if all we do is ask questions, we can be plagued with self-doubt. we may not move forward, you know? And so I think that balance of those two energies in all of us, in the things that we do, in the spaces that we create, is a way that we can achieve a sort of equilibrium that allows us to feel whole and to see the like incredible power and energy that exists in that space between both, like that spectrum of what gender and sexuality and all of these things can look like. That's one of my beliefs, and I think I want to say that also because in talking about gender, I think it's difficult for folks sometimes to move with that fluidity because we've been conditioned against it. Because we have ritualized in our society just speaking about this dichotomy, this binary. And we make ritual of a lot of things. So I ask you to turn your attention to what you ritualize in your life, whether that be money, whether that be work, whether that be critique, and examine that and see if there are places that you want to replace and renew and create. Use your creative energy to build something that serves you better and serves your community better. When I talk about gender, I mentioned that for some it's very difficult to sort of move in the fluidity of non-binariness. I just made a word. Or two-spirit identities, or the multitude that exists in between. And I think often that is because we are barriered by whatever structure we've created in our own minds. And you might hear parents say, well, I've called this person by this name for their whole life. I gave birth to them, and this is the only name I can ever call them. Or a friend might say, like, it's just too hard for me to use they because it's not part of my language. And what I would argue is that that's a perfect place for a ritual. That's a beautiful place for a ritual. Perhaps every day when you wake or every time you're going to see that friend, you will take a minute and say, they, them, they, them, they, them. Maybe you'll hold a picture of them and you'll say, I honor all of the parts of you. You know, that is work for us. That is how we can evolve, by writing and creating the ceremony and the rituals we need to live in this world now, to be in harmony with each other, to really feel pride down to every part of ourselves, even the parts that are so far away and so hard to reach. I think that's one of the reasons we have creativity, is so that we can keep dreaming more beautifully. And I'm just really honored to be able to share this practice with all of you. I'm going to maybe share one more piece before I leave with you. And also I'm going to tell you about one other ritual that I have created for myself. And it used to be only on my birthdays, which I just turned 40. Hey! Thank you. It's incredible because honestly, as a little queerdo, growing up in Catholic church, I really didn't think that I was going to make it this far. So it's so important to me that I've made it with the help of so many people. So one of the things that I started doing some years ago to honor my body, this body that has kept me here and held space for my spirit and my heart and all of this, and my mind in all the directions it goes, is a practice of adornment. And that's something that shows up in ceremony in a lot of spaces, but if you don't have ceremony, we build it for ourselves. And so on my birthday, for many years, what I would do is I would invite a friend of mine who is a makeup artist over, and she would body paint me from head to toe. We'd choose something different every year. Once it was all gold, and actually you can see this is where this image comes from, the flowers in my hair, the gold on my lip and throat. And and I invited the wonderful photographer, Kay Ho, over, and Kay took photos, and we made this a moment of ceremony for me to honor my body and my journey and this moment. And that is something that I have ritualized. It used to be just on my birthdays, but now I'm like, am I feeling a little sad? time for a ritual flower bath, you know? Whenever it's needed, because it is needed. It's hard being in this world. And so that is a part of what I do. And I will say that the last thing I want to share is this poem. It's another thing that I pay a lot of attention to, and that is endings. I think that endings are really important. They're really important, and they hold a lot of information for us. And it's also the part of the journey that I think people like to avoid the most. It's the part that hurts, you know? And I think it requires, just like when we lose somebody, it requires attention to that grief and to that moment. And so this is a little piece about endings, about paying attention to them, about honoring them, and feeling them a little differently. And it borrows a tune I think you will remember. Don't it always seem to go that we don't know what we've got till it's gone? Every passing second is another ending. Maybe Joni Mitchell is a prophet or a witch. I scarred a record of hers once. You know the one, a kind of premonition. One day I will say goodbye so hard that my whole body will blossom into a field of poppies, a single iris dripping from each of my eyes. You could be proud. I said no again today. Cut the cord I used to sing your name and shattered our tune into 1,000 tiny bells, then danced toward some doorway. This bruised sea I've crossed, it is the picture of our great big ending. Spitting image of a falling red cedar piling her body between yours and mine, kicking a heel against the door as we stumble, wilted. Fog a breath against my window. Finger so long into the misty film separating us. Go away again. I promise you, there is always something good to walk away from. Sweeter still, once you've left, you know the freedom is exquisite. Thank you. Thank you, friends. I also, come on up. I want to just say a huge thank you to Plenty of Plates, to A Better Life Foundation, and to Creative Mornings. When you all asked me to be here, I didn't make it easy for you. It required many meetings and conversations, and I was so impressed with the way that these folks met me and honored the asks that I had to focus this into community, to make sure that we fed as many people as possible in their hearts and also in their bellies. To just make this as expansive as we could. And you all really did that and more, so I appreciate you so much. Thank you. And I love you.
I think this is the first standing ovation we've ever had at Creative Mornings. Thank you so much, Jillian.